The following is a paid program, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent the opinions of the management of this station or Pamel Broadcasting, and the views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, and callers of this program are solely their own. They do not represent or reflect the views, policies, or official position of ACA, its affiliates, or its staff. ACA does not endorse any statements made during this broadcast. This is 1 in 31, a presentation from Anderson Center for Autism. 1 in 31 is a weekly show devoted to autism spectrum disorder.
Good morning and welcome to 1 in 31, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, Chief Development Officer at Anderson Center for Autism. And today I am very happy to be speaking with Dr. Blake Warner, Chief Clinical Fellow at UCLA, so pretty far away from me. And we're going to be discussing the Peers for Dating program. Dr. Warner, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I really love using this platform of the podcast to meet and get to know people doing interesting things in the field. Especially those that in some way, shape, or form align with our mission to optimize the quality of life for individuals with autism. And I think most people would agree, if not everyone would agree, that a social life, a romantic life, possibly a long-term partnership or a marriage or any iteration of that is definitely part of a quality of life in however that looks for you as an individual. So I'm very excited to learn more about this program. But let's start, if you don't mind, with, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, personally, professionally, wherever you'd like to start?
Sure, absolutely. So maybe I'll start with, my experience with autism, kind of what got me into that field, and then I'll throw in the dating piece after. So I guess autism is kind of the family business. I have some family connections with autism, and then my mother was a special education teacher, and my older sister is an early interventionist in a preschool. So kind of the family business in that way, both from personal perspectives as well as working with autistic populations. And I guess in grad school, my love for the community and for the disability field grew as well. I was a LEND trainee in South Dakota, so leadership education in neurodevelopmental and related disabilities. So I had lots of experience there.
I love those, but that sounds great.
Yes, absolutely. And then, I found that the work Peers was doing was really inspirational to me. I ended up doing my dissertation on Peers in a rural location, so in South Dakota, then ended up at UCLA for my clinical psychology internship. And so that's really how I got connected with the Peers world, the social skills aspect of things. And then with the dating and sexuality as an interest of mine, really occurred when I was working at a residential location in South Dakota. I kept getting referred, client after client for having quote unquote inappropriate sexual behaviors or inappropriate behaviors towards others. And, I kept thinking, what could we be doing instead of just focusing time after time on, when things go wrong, making them go right? How instead could we appropriately teach people and give them the tools that can be effective to help them succeed in relationships. And so that's where my kind of dating and sexuality piece came in. And then I'm fortunate enough to work with Dr. Elizabeth Lageson here at UCLA. She developed the Peers program and was working on the Peers for Dating program. And so I'm so fortunate to be able to work on that project with her.
Thank you for that background. And we're going to comment on this a couple times throughout the conversation today, but I know that in terms of that program, you are currently recruiting, right, for groups to continue that research, right, that's involved in that.
Yeah.
So we're going to mention that a few times at the end. We can talk about how people can learn more and get involved. So you said so much there that is piquing my interest. I'm going to start just geographically. So you've obviously spent some time. Are you from South Dakota?
I'm from Minnesota originally, so a Midwest boy through and through.
Great. Awesome. I'm married to a Midwest and an Iowa boy. So yeah. So so between kind of, it sounds like the start of your professional and educational interests and that specific referral, then I want to also talk about that in South Dakota and then moving to UCLA. Did you notice an obvious change or difference, both maybe perceptually, culturally, socially, like in the two different environments in terms of the way people with disabilities overall were sort of the access that they may have had to supports? I don't know what part of South Dakota you were in, but was it a more rural area? Was it a place where there was sort of less of maybe an understanding or or acceptance? What were some of the differences you noticed there?
Yeah, I think some of the big differences I noticed are maybe access to services. So definitely, I would say all of South Dakota is rural. The largest location has maybe 200,000 people. So that's, yes, very rural. And so that's a big difference. And then, just access to information, I think is something that's huge. And of course, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation throughout the country and the world. But, people in rural locations may not have access to the most up-to-date information and might need more support in finding those resources.
So we can come back to that. I was just curious because I would think, obviously, or maybe not obviously, but I would think in California, a much more populous state, lots of cities, lots of universities, lots of sort of people getting into various fields that are interconnected and very person-oriented, that maybe there's more access. But the other thing that you talked about, in what kind of got you really focused on the sort of dating, romance, sexuality aspect, is these referrals that were coming in. And you were probably the second person since I've been at Anderson, which is almost 20 years now, who I've ever heard really make the distinction, vocalize, I would say, the distinction between a referral for quote unquote, inappropriate or maybe abnormal, though thankfully that word I think is not used so much anymore, but inappropriate sexual behaviors versus, could we break it down a little bit more? Is it inappropriate sexual behavior, or is it sort of typical sexual behavior expressed in a socially unacceptable manner, which often, at least for the people that we serve here at Anderson, who are predominantly can be behaviorally complex, but also very challenged with communication. Do you think you were getting referrals and seeing people when you were practicing who were having very normal feelings, very typical feelings and desires, and just struggling with how do I express that in a way that is socially appropriate?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for making that distinction. I think that's really important for us to think about, because I would say probably there were some of each, but for the most part, like you're saying, it's, people having typical sexual desires or the desire for relationships. And the problem is they may not have the education to know, one, how to identify those desires or put language or words onto those things. And then the other part is they may not know, as you said, how to engage with others, or when and where different things might be appropriate, or how to express interest in a way that would be perceived by others as appropriate.
I find that fascinating, just because, especially for a person in your position and others who might be working with an individual in a therapeutic context, maybe even, one-on-one counseling or therapy, or that the avenues for all those different possibilities in terms of what that person might be struggling with are quite vast. I mean, for some, it's a very specific, we need to better understand what's really happening here in a more deeper level. And for others, it might be really about sort of, I think, what you're talking about with proactively, what can we do to set this person up for success as they're entering those years of their life? I mean, puberty, and I know just, again, from being at Anderson, that, puberty is a tough time for everybody who, and we as humans typically all go through it at some point. When you combine that with autism or other neurodivergencies, or even something as, clear cut as just a communication delay or disorder, I think it changes the game so much. And maybe we overlook that sometimes as the typical population, or a typical population that, well, you would just talk to somebody, or you're in health class and you're getting educated about this, and you're seeing all these YouTube videos that help break it down and explain consent and, all of these things. But if you take all that away in terms of access, it's a massive amount of hormones and feelings and things that oftentimes feel uncontrollable, I would think, especially when you're young. Mm-hmm. So when you were in South Dakota, just we'll get to peers in a minute. But when you were there and you were working with individuals directly, was there kind of an age range that you saw?
Yes.
Was it lining up with a puberty or a couple of years into? Okay.
Yep. Your suspicions are exactly correct. These were all teenagers I was working with. So puberty was very much at the forefront. And again, it was a lack of education and a lack of access to be able to learn about their own bodies and about boundaries and how to express interest, and even find where they would have access to date if that's something that they were interested in, or have private time if that's something that they were interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I promise next we're going to hear all about peers and how this works. But the takeaway I would get from what you're saying is let us try not to avoid the conversation about the need for sex education and body awareness and hygiene and all those things, again, that are usually built into a public school's curriculum when it comes to health. And let us not forget that people with autism, other neurodivergencies, any type of real, any challenge that they're facing that might be complicated by communication challenges, I think let us not forget that they also it's on us to kind of make sure that we're exposing them and educating everybody in that area, because it doesn't just automatically make sense. In fact, I think puberty is so hard because it seems to purposely not make sense for like a really long time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Puberty is a really awkward time for everyone, and I think we can lean into that awkwardness and acknowledge it, speak it into existence, and then let it be awkward. But yeah.
And I many years ago, and I still here at Anderson, but I had a different role. And I actually was the chair of our sexuality committee. And I remember that committee, of course, had its awkward moments. I mean, you're talking about things that, as with your colleagues, that you're not necessarily talking about on a regular basis. However, what I learned as we developed a curriculum and, kind of leaned into it, like you said, like this is happening, we need to have some sort of a curriculum, something to help the staff, something to help the students and the adults and the families and everything. But what I took away from it mostly was that there are services, there are supports, there are tools, there are resources available. So anybody out there listening saying, well, I wouldn't even know where to start. There are opportunities. There's curriculum out there. There's lots of different ways to communicate, sort of where you would with anybody, which is start really basic. You don't jump to the really exciting stuff. You figure out where that person is, right? And we start there. I love that. We are going to take a short break. When we come back, we're devoting the whole second half here to Peers for Dating program at UCLA. Thank you, Dr. Warner, for being with us. We'll be right back.
I'm Angela Bassett. As a first responder on screen, I know what it means to act fast in an emergency. In real life, the same urgency can save lives, especially when it comes to food allergy. For 33 million Americans, one bite can cause a life-threatening reaction. Now, there's a needle-free option, a new way to carry epinephrine. Know the risk, know the options. Be ready to act. Learn more at foodallergy.org/ready to act.
Stand Up to Cancer asked leading cancer researchers to speak about why they do their work.
Two words come to mind for me. One is responsibility, the other is purpose.
It's just so inspiring to do research that impacts human lives.
Stand Up to Cancer has been a critical partner in advancing research for cancer.
Cancer research saves lives.
So please, help us fight in this battle against cancer.
Be a part of the team that ends cancer at standuptocancer.org.
And now 1 in 31 continues on 100.7 WHUD. This is a weekly community affairs presentation from the Anderson Center for Autism.
Welcome back to 1 in 31, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and I'm talking today with Dr. Blake Warner, who is the Chief Clinical Fellow at UCLA, and he's here to talk to us about the Peers for Dating program. And thank you for indulging me in some of the background stuff for the first half. But now let's hear all about the Peers program, the dating program. I know you're recruiting, so tell us all about it.
All right, so I'll start with some background about Peers in general. I think it's a good place to start. So Peers was originally developed here at UCLA 20 plus years ago. So it's about a 20-year-old program. And it was originally a social skills program aimed at helping autistic teens make and keep friends. It's now expanded beyond just autism. So we see teens with varying diagnoses or no diagnoses who are just interested in learning social skills. We've also then developed a young adult program for those over the age of 18, as well as a preschool program for preschoolers. It's a puppet facilitated social skills program, very cute to see. And then there's that service gap, right? There's a service gap for individuals who are adults, and so in addition to our general social skills program, there's this huge need for, as you may guess, the dating, right? So there's not a lot of services for individuals on the spectrum, or again, other individuals who are just interested in learning dating skills. And so Dr. Elizabeth Laugesen, the developer of the program, really focused in on research and creating this program specifically for dating. So that's where we're at, where we have this 20-week program Peers for Dating. Just completed our second randomized control trial. So we are currently recruiting for our first ever non-research cohort of Peers for Dating. So very exciting. If you're interested, I'll give you the information maybe at the end of our spiel here on how to get involved.
To the link when we put the podcast out. Great.
Wonderful. Yes, and the program is really focused on social skills relating to dating. So everything from where can I find people to date? We know online dating is huge. So we have a couple lessons and sessions devoted to online dating. If our participants are interested, we have tips and tricks for creating dating profiles, and we give direct feedback. So that's, absolutely one of my favorite parts of my job is I get people's dating profiles and I get to give them feedback, and can't believe I get paid for that.
And how helpful to have a safe, trustworthy, professional person who you're not necessarily looking to date to say it's like having your own sort of really trustworthy best friend built into the program, which I would think that some of the people who participate may not have that cohort of friends who are going to be honest but also supportive and caring. That's great.
Yeah, and absolutely. The interesting thing about that, though, is the other part of the program and Peers in general is we have a social coaching component. And so for our dating program, our participants will bring in a dating coach. So this could be a parent, a relative, a friend. Doesn't have to be a parent. We know not everyone wants to practice
there, right?
But absolutely, if parents and our participants are comfortable, they can bring their parents along. And we teach these dating coaches how to be an ongoing coach for whoever is participating in our program. So we have a 20-week program, which I know sounds like a long time, but in the grand scheme of things, 20 weeks is, really just a blip in someone's life. And so we're teaching these dating coaches how to help the young adult or whoever's participating to be successful in dating. So they're also learning these tips and tricks about dating profiles, supporting their participant in making great choices. That's one of the things we talk about as well in Peers is that dating is a choice. We don't get to date everybody, and not everybody gets to date us.
I love that line. I read that in one of the articles, and I thought that was so perfect. Because you can easily fall into that sense of nobody wants to date me. Well, no, not everybody gets to date me. And I don't get to date everybody else. I thought that little twist on, that sentence was so great. Very key.
Absolutely. Right. And I think our classic example we love to use is I don't get to date Bradley Cooper just if I wanted to. He would also have to agree to that. And people, like you said, people who want to date me, if they're not a good choice for me or I'm not interested, it's not fair to either of us if I'm kind of stringing someone along. So we can really lean into the dating being a choice on both sides.
It sounds fantastic. And I love that you've taken the time to add in those support pieces, which I will say, I think can often be overlooked, especially when people are putting together programs, social programs and employment programs, anything where there's kind of a very clear kind of goal. It can be overlooked to put in those support people along the way. Because for many folks, autistic or not, I think for many people, just having the skills, reading the book, following the manual, so to speak, it's tempting, especially for those of us who might want to just follow step by step and I'll get to, from A to Z and I'll be good. But where we fall down, right, is where something takes a slight left turn and it wasn't in the guidebook.
Yes,
I don't know. So I love that you put that in there. Could you walk us through a little bit, the 20-week program, is it, when you're in the program, is it a daily connection? Is it weekly? Is it a group setting? Like what's happening in those 20 weeks?
Absolutely. So we have groups of around 12 individuals, and they are virtual, so they're online. So we run our programs. They're available for anyone worldwide, as long as they're willing to be in Pacific time zone. And the groups themselves are 90-minute sessions. So we usually have homework assignments each week. So we start with about 30 minutes of homework review from the previous week. And those assignments are really focused on social skills relating to dating. And so our participants will review homework. We have a didactic lesson where we teach a new skill or a new topic. Then we practice the skills. So each of our participants will practice with our coaches. We'll give them feedback. And then we assign homework at the end. At the same time, the dating coaches are in a separate room. So we have two groups going simultaneously simultaneously. And in that room, we also can go through that homework review and give them coaching tips. So we're teaching them how to be coaches. They get the same dating content, and then we reunify at the end where we negotiate homework all together. And so they're 90-minute sessions concurrently with the dating participant and their dating coach.
Fantastic. I love it. So you mentioned before that you're starting to recruit for your first non-research group. What has your research up to now, though, shown you? What have you learned? I mean, do you have success rates? What do you measure? Like successful dates or longer term outcomes? But how are you, or what kind of data are you looking at, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're still in the data analysis phase. So I can't give you any very specific results, but the things that we're looking at are exactly what you're saying. So number of dates, we look at the knowledge of the dating skills. So are the participants in our program learning the things that we are hopefully teaching them? And also things relating to their interest in dating. So number of dates, if they're in long-term relationships. We also will do follow-up studies later on to see how folks are doing kind of months and years after the program.
Right. So I like that because it sounds like you're looking at things that have more to do, still keeping the individual in mind. Because there are people that I have known who love to date, who, they'll go on a number of dates. They might even be dating multiple people at the same time in a very, casual way. Great. I was never like that. I'm a relationshipper. One long term to the next was basically how I did things. So I like that you're looking at the individual sort of general understanding of some of the really important sort of boundaries and parameters around dating, but also generally, are they just engaged with it in some capacity? Are they still interested in it? Which to me, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's cool. Okay. So what are your, we only have a couple minutes left here. Going back to maybe you just as a personally, obviously, and professionally, but really, what are your hopes? You're deeply involved in this initiative, in this program. You smile every time you're talking about it. So what do you hope to see, maybe over the next couple of years for the program and for the participants?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we're very passionate about in our clinic, in particular in the Peers Clinic, is dissemination. We don't want to sit on this program and hoard it for ourselves. So Dr. Laugesen is very, very passionate about making sure that the program becomes accessible. So what I would love to see in the next few years is for us to, finish our research results, publish those, and then make this accessible. So for providers to be able to be trained in the program so that they can run their own dating programs. I think everyone should have access to programs like this if they want, and spreading the word and making it available, worldwide as well as throughout the country, I think is something that will be our next steps and something that's very important to me and our clinic.
That's great. I love that. I think that would make a huge impact for a lot of people. Is there I almost don't want to ask this question. I'm so excited about how accessible it all seems. As you're recruiting, are there certain characteristics, certain in age range? Like if somebody were listening to this and saying, I want to join, I want to sign up, I want to be part of this, who is eligible? Or is it very open? Is it restrictive? What do you think?
Yeah. So definitely 18 or older is our first criteria. There's no diagnostic requirements. So, you don't have to prove that you're autistic or even say you're autistic. We don't mind. Tell us that information, but anyone could participate. Our research is through age 45. I don't know that that's a strict cutoff necessarily. We may not have evidence to show that it's successful beyond that, but if you're interested and you want to come check it out. Other criteria, we move at a fairly quick pace, and so just kind of being able to keep up with that class pace for like a weekly class. Internet connection, since it will be virtual, would be important, and then the ability to kind of pick a dating coach. So that's the other piece that's important, is that whether it's, again, a family member or trusted friend who knows you pretty well, making sure you have someone in mind who would be willing to be that dating coach for you.
Got it. That sounds great. And then I think we're out of time, but real quick, where would people go to find out more information? Do you have a website?
Absolutely. You can check out our website, and you can our email is peersclinic@ucla.edu. And
at ucla.edu. Got it. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
And sending it in like just an inquiry email,
Yep.
they'll get a response?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. And when we air this, we will also include a link to some more information about the Peers Dating Program. Dr. Werner, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really think it was a great conversation. I learned quite a bit, and it really sounds like a wonderful program you're running. So thanks for sharing it with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. This is 131, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky. And remember, Anderson cares.
You've been listening to 1 in 31, a weekly presentation from Anderson Center for Autism. Join them for another edition of the show next weekend.